Hi there, I'm Kevin, Community Manager at Cooperative Innovations, the developers of Curators, and I'm joined today by our Partnerships Manager, Lauren Livesey.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, and yourself?
I'm not too bad at all.
Wonderful, that's good to hear. So, Lauren, it's International Museums Day today, or IMD for short, and this is a day that's organised by the International Council of Museums, and it's to raise awareness about museums being an important means of cultural exchange, enrichment of cultures and development, mutual understanding, cooperation and peace, among others. As someone who lives and breathes museums, I just wanted to chat to you a bit about this sector and this year's specific theme, which is Recover and Reimagine.
Sounds good. Let's get going.
Wonderful. So let's start with your background in the space. How did you get into the industry, and what is it that you love about museums?
I've been massively into museums from being really young. Every Sunday, I would spend the day with my dad, and we would either go to a park if the weather was good, or we would go to a museum. And I was brought up in Yorkshire, so 8 times out of 10, the weather was not good. So I spent a lot of time in museums when I was a kid, and there was just always a space that I felt comfortable in, that I was interested by. I loved the stories that they were telling. I loved finding out about pretty much anything. I was a complete kind of hound for information and knowledge. My background initially was in English literature, and then I did a postgraduate degree in the study of the country house. Spent some time working in various places around the country. And the last 7 or so years, I've been working at the Bronte Passage Museum in the curatorial team, in the front of house team, and running their events program. So I've got a bit of a background in most parts of working in museums, which has been absolutely amazing. And it's something I never get tired of doing. I never get tired of talking to people about the stuff that makes me really passionate. I never get tired of pulling out that little bit of knowledge that I know is going to make people's eyes go wide, or being able to put items together to tell a story, or just to kind of see the impact that some of these special places can have on people.
So you've got quite an extensive and varied background in the museum sector, and now you've sort of pivoted over and you're working with Cooperative Innovations, who are a software developer. So you've joined the team to work with us on Curators. And for anyone who doesn't know what Curators is or is maybe unfamiliar with it, do you want to give the elevator pitch about what it is?
Absolutely. I should be getting good at this because I've done it a few times now, but I'm working as partnerships manager. So my role is to really get people in museums excited about Curators, which is currently in development, as you say, and is a platform for social, cultural, virtual tours. So you might have done virtual tours of museums in the past, clicking around on a desktop to find out more about different stories, galleries and exhibitions. What Curators aims to do is to create a platform which you can access in a variety of ways through a VR headset, over your computer or laptop, on your tablet or phone, where you can go into that digital museum space with as many people as you want. Bring your friends, bring your family, all the people who are important to you. Because I think if the last year has told us anything, it's that having those social experiences with the people who you care about is really fulfilling. And you can pick your favorite museum or gallery and go and experience a tour of their stories and their exhibitions. You could do that in your own time, self-guided, have a look around and follow your nose to your favorite item or to your favorite collection of pieces. Or you could take a pre-recorded tour where one of the curators or experts in that particular museum has gone in, recorded information about the artifacts on display, and is providing all of that knowledge, all of the questions that you might have, all the questions that you might want to get answered have already been answered for you by the person who knows the most about it, or the real kind of plum and premier experience would be a live guided tour where you meet at a set time in the space of your favourite museum with an expert or curator or somebody who knows a great deal about that space, and they take you round, they share the stories with you, they tell you that little tidbit of information, and you can ask them questions. So effectively, every tour is bespoke to you. It will never happen just that way again, because you can, as I said before, follow your nose for the bits that most intrigue, entertain, inform, or excite you.
That's great. I mean, you've explained there how Curators essentially allows an individual or a group of people to go on a virtual tour of a museum, which is very immersive without actually having to visit the museum. And as you rightly mentioned, over the last year or so with the pandemic, most of these places have been closed to the public, and something like this allows people to keep visiting these exhibits even while closed. But I think it is important to just make it clear that Curators isn't designed as a replacement for visiting these places, but it's more of a supplement. And obviously it does offer some advantages and some different things. You've already mentioned that each tour can be different, but obviously there's accessibility as well for different people, if you have any views on that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I find so fascinating about what Curators can do and what it will do as we continue to develop it. There are plenty of reasons why people don't or can't or won't visit museums. Sometimes the travel can be a real difficulty, and I think in the next several years, as international travel becomes something we all think more carefully about, going to a foreign country might be something we do less. So Curators will give you the opportunity to virtually visit your favourite museum or location wherever it is in the world. You can be in London and visiting Edinburgh, Buenos Aires, Reykjavik, Tokyo, wherever you choose to go. But on a more local basis, sometimes travelling can be difficult for people who might have accessibility issues of varying degrees. And, let's be honest, the difficulty of travel can sometimes come from monetary issues as well. So if you're somebody who, as I say, can't or isn't able to travel or to get to a museum physically, Curators can really bring that experience to life for you. You can experience as much as we possibly can the same sort of stories, interpretation, and inspiration that you'd get in a live visit. And within a museum or gallery itself, sometimes accessibility issues can stop you from fully enjoying the whole experience. Older buildings might not have lifts or the capacity for all visitors to get to all aspects of their site. Curators can remove those physical accessibility barriers and really allow all visitors to experience every element that there is on offer. But I think as well what you say, Kevin, about Curators being a supplement to the experience is really important. I know, as somebody who loves, lives and breathes museums, nothing can compare to being in that space, seeing that item up close. But there are so many advantages, so many bonuses that can come from providing this to providing this platform to pique people's interest, draw them in, and allow them to experience some elements of your collection online.
It's very interesting you should say that about it piquing people's interest, because I also, being from a technical background, see this bringing in a completely new customer, because you have technophiles like myself who may not visit museums very often, may not get the opportunity to, or it just may not be the first thing that we think of when we're looking for something to go and do for a day out. But we've got people who have virtual reality setups that they've obviously gone and invested in, and sometimes it's just a case of, here's something new that I can do, something I can use this immersive technology, and it's an experience. Google Earth, for a good example, Google Earth VR is something that people spend a lot of time in, even though it's no longer supported, because it's just great to go and fly around the globe and look at landmarks and things like that. And we're talking about the same thing, but obviously in much more detail. Being able to go into a building, look at very small objects and very large ones, but also to have somebody there talking to you about them, answering your questions, explaining their historical and cultural significance. So, I think that will help museums in terms of actually seeing, an extra stream of customers coming in that they might not have had otherwise.
Absolutely. I think you're really onto something there. And if there's anything we've learned over the past 15 months or so, as we've all been dealing with this new normal of the pandemic, lots of museums have done some incredible digital work and have begun to draw in audience members from all over the globe, people who might not ever have been able to visit the physical site, but people have been intrigued by the stories they've been sharing on their social media, virtual tours, close-ups of particular items, interviews or blogs by and about curators. So I really think that Curators, the platform, is going to be able to provide content that so many people are going to find interesting. And like you say, the concept of being able to be in Reykjavik for breakfast, go to Kuala Lumpur for, brunch, round out the morning in Sydney, finish off the day in Buenos Aires. I mean, what's not to like about that?
Yeah, the internet over the last, 15, 20 years, it's made the world a much smaller place. So it's so easy now to form friendships and relationships with people all over the world, to be able to buy things from, a different country. No longer are we sort of limited by sort of borders and oceans, and to be able to just visit literally anywhere in the globe at the click of a button is, it's quite an experience, really.
Completely. And I think, you're so right when you say that in so many ways, the internet and these technologies have been able to make the world smaller and bring us closer together. But in some ways, they've massively exploded the world and made it so much larger, so much bigger, because you're now able to access stories, cultural moments, artifacts of real significance, and the interpretation and knowledge that is held on those artifacts by people around the globe. You can really widen your horizons and find out about things that would have been so difficult to know a great deal about only 20, 30, 40 years ago. So that's another thing that I'm really passionate about with Curators, is being able to tell these stories that, I'm not going to say that they're not known or not engaged with, but they're just not as well known as they might have been previously. And being able to speak to the people who feel equally passionately, who want to share this information, who want to inspire new visitors to find out more and to experience the interpretation, to gain the insight that they're able to deliver. I think that's really, really exciting.
So you rightly mentioned there that it does expand the world, and it will allow people to visit a lot of places that they might not have necessarily been aware existed. A lot of people are familiar with like the big national galleries and the big national museums, but there are so many sort of little local galleries all around the world that most people would probably be unaware of. And when you were talking about accessibility and travel, I think for a lot of people, there are people who might well visit somewhere like the Louvre or the Smithsonian or somewhere really big and famous while they're away on vacation. But it's far less likely that someone would go through the expense and all of the travel necessary just to go and visit somewhere small, even if they're aware these places exist. And with something like Curators, you could literally have a browsable list, and you don't have to worry about, well, I don't really want to go to this particular country, or I can't afford to fly to this place, or I don't have time to visit this area. And you can literally just sit down. Where am I going to go today? Oh, this one looks interesting, and you're ready to go.
Absolutely spot on. I think it's those hidden gem museums that are really going to thrive with a platform like Curators. As you say, you might have 3 days in an amazing new city, and you go to the headline places, but as you quite rightly mentioned, that might mean that you don't get a little further out of the city or to somewhere that's a tiny bit smaller, because your time is limited and it's precious to you. So being able, from the comfort of your living room, to go to a hidden gem, to take a chance in a way on something that you might not go into because you weren't sure if it was exactly what you wanted to know more about, but find out that it's absolutely stunning and you want to know so much more about it. Little places, I'm thinking of places I've been physically in London, like Dennis Sever's house or the Foundling Museum. Those weren't places I went on my first couple of visits to London, but they're my favourite places to go now. So I think hidden gems have got some incredible artifacts under their roof and some absolutely phenomenal stories to tell. They can really shine on Curators. And also what we hope that the platform will do a little further down the line is it will sense that you've spent time in a certain museum, or you spent a great deal of time in a certain gallery, and it will be able to recommend to you things that it thinks you might enjoy. So if you go to a gallery and spend all of your time looking at one particular artist, it might go, oh, there's more of their work in another place that's available to you on the platform. Would you like to experience it? Now, in real life, you might not be able to go from one end of the country to the other in a day. You can do that over your lunch break on Curators. And it will, in some ways, learn what you like and help to recommend, so you can find more of that out there, and you can ask those questions, see those places, and really broaden your knowledge.
That's really interesting, because I see that helping both the museums and the visitors, because visitors are going to get recommendations about places that meet their interests that they might not have been aware existed. So it opens up the horizons for places for them to visit, and at the same time that's giving more exposure to some of the museums who, as you say, maybe aren't the headline events. And as you mentioned, some of the famous houses in London, there are lots of little museums that, to walk past them, just look like a residential house. You wouldn't necessarily know that there was even an exhibit in there unless you were looking for it specifically. So that helps with that, and I think that is really good for for both sides. You did mention when we were talking about accessibility that you are working with museum partners. Obviously, that's what you're doing here at Co-op Innovations. How do you feel that the museum partners are actually helping with the design and development of Curators?
Oh, I mean, it's been absolutely amazing. Every partner is looking for something a little bit different, and we're not trying to create a sort of production line of, well, we work this way with every museum and this is how it absolutely has to be. We're really kind of working in partnership. We're collaborating to create something that best suits the needs of the audience who will be, interested in each individual museum. And it's really opened our eyes to a huge number of ways that we might be able to use the platform and utilise the platform. For example, I don't think anybody at Cooperative Innovations initially was thinking about how incredibly important something like this could be in terms of disaster management, or in terms of making a recording for posterity of certain items that might be, I'm thinking of our industrial heritage. There are still working 18th century and sort of Enlightenment period beam engines, or things that are currently still working, but they've kind of got a managed obsolescence. As they continue to work, they might degrade to a point where they're no longer workable. But something like Curators can make a record of exactly what that looks like, and to be able to keep it for future generations, which I think is so hugely important. I just think it's really interesting to kind of be able to approach each new partnership completely fresh, and to be able to build something that is genuinely collaborative.
You mentioned just there about Curators being, in a sense, an archival service for museums to be able to keep a record of these exhibits and artifacts that might not be around for too long. But I know you and I have spoken before that there are some exhibits in some museums that just actually never get seen by the public, or simply only get paraded out on very special occasions because they're so delicate.
Absolutely, yes. There are, well, first of all, so many museums have got these huge and incredibly fascinating collections, but simply because of things like basic spatial issues, can only display small elements actually physically in their collections and in their galleries. But looking long term, if you were able to digitize all of your collection, you could have it all online. You could create a virtual gallery where you move things in and out with a lot more ease than you might be able to do physically. Artifacts that are too delicate to display, on open shelving or in a gallery, are able to be, safely captured once, and then they can be displayed online for, forevermore, really. And there are certain areas, certain things in museums that are, I'm thinking of huge, heavy statues that you can't really move around. You can't take that up to the top floor to put it in a new exhibition where it might be really interesting, because you've got to have this huge piece of marble in the one area of the museum where the floor is reinforced and it can be looked after properly. But we don't have those physical restrictions in a digital space. You can take that huge statue and put it right up next to an absolutely tiny piece of doll's house furniture and tell a new and interesting story. I think that's what, at the end of the day, for me, museums have always been about stories and storytelling. And Curators came about because it was a way to tell different stories. It's a storytelling platform and technique. So to find ways to piece together narratives that are so valid and so interesting by taking the greatest and largest and most humongous item in the collection and putting it up next to something really dainty and being able to bring out the interesting and hidden threads there is something that I just feel so excited about, and something I can't wait to do more of.
It is a fascinating concept, and something that just popped into my head based on what you were saying there is that also museums wouldn't be limited by just having, you know, one physical copy of an item, because in the digital world you could have that same statue and you could have 3 or 4 copies of it in different places within the virtual museum in different exhibits and comparing them to, you know, other artifacts.
Absolutely, that's something that you could do. And as well, you know, one thing that I've been thinking about in terms of, you know, it's a difficult period for museums at the moment. I think we can all acknowledge that, you know, many of them have been closed for months and months on end. And there's something that I find really appealing about the concept of these pre-recorded tours where, you know, you can have your building once we reopen, which we've been able to do in the UK, at least from this week on. You could have your physical building closed, but overnight you might be having 2, 3, 4 pre-recorded tours taking place in somebody else's home. You don't need to worry about it, but each of those visitors is paying a ticket price to look around the gallery with your pre-recorded curator. You're quite literally lying there asleep, and people are paying to access your museum and to find out more about those stories. So logistically, you know, and financially, it can be a real boon in that way. And one element about Curators that I was thinking of and should have mentioned a little earlier, Kevin, was something we're doing at the moment, which is shrinking and shrinking down and growing up the size of artifacts so that you can see them in more detail. And I turned into an absolute child the first time I was able to do that, you know, go into a virtual gallery and interact with an item, because I don't need to worry about there being a velvet rope or a glass display case, because I can't physically hurt an item. I can go in there. We've got a room of swords in our demo gallery at the moment, which is amazing. I can pick up the sword. I can grow it up so that I can see the filigree detail around the hilt. I can squeeze it right down small. I can grow it up. You know, that's just something that is endlessly fascinating to me, and something that I think really cuts to the heart of what museums are about. You know, I've always viewed it as you've got these two competing elements of what a museum is trying to achieve, which is conservation, you know, to safeguard these items, to keep them as safe as they possibly can be kept, but also to allow the public to access them so that the stories that they exemplify can continue to be told and that we can find resonances within them. And, you know, I think it's so difficult as somebody who's worked both front of house and back of house in a museum to find ways to get that balance exactly right. And I feel that Curators can really help that. You know, you can allow people to get really up close with a digital rendering of an object to find out all of that information. And the object itself can be kept completely safe, can be monitored to ensure that it's not going to deteriorate or degrade, but people still get that feeling of interaction and they're still able to really feel invested in and inspired by the artifact. So I think Curators is really going to do some interesting things to allow museums to both conserve and tell stories at the same time.
I have actually witnessed several sword fights during testing sessions in our room of swords, and obviously that's something that's normally frowned upon within a museum.
I don't know what you mean. I certainly never have done such a thing.
No, well, of course not. But there are those that might, and that's one of the great things about it. You know, there's no way that anyone can damage these digital assets. You can pick them up, you can turn them around, you can have a close look at them, and if you were so inclined to throw one across the room, you're not going to cause any damage, and everything is absolutely safe.
I need to state for the record that we are not encouraging doing this.
No, of course not.
And it's really important to say as well that we absolutely recognise that, you know, it's not appropriate for every item to have that level of interactivity, and it's something that will be decided on a case-by-case basis by each museum. You know, we're not in any way kind of endorsing doing that for everything, but there are items, there are elements of a collection that are really interesting to be able to gain that level of interactivity. So yeah, those are features that we're building into our galleries our digital galleries in collaboration with our museum partners.
Yes, of course. I mean, I'm having a bit of fun there, but I should stress that of course we do for our museum partners. We do have moderation tools for the tour guides, so there's always ways to move people around because they have the option to sort of teleport visitors to a particular spot during a tour. If there are people who are being disruptive, there's ways to sort of mute people and stop them spoiling an experience for everybody else. So we are keeping those things in mind, and rightly, as you say, with the exhibits. Museums can choose what people are allowed to pick up and whether they can resize them and things like that. So it's by no means forced on anybody. We're just giving the options there because it's a fun little thing to add in.
Absolutely.
We'll just get back round to this year's theme for International Museums Day, which is Recover and Reimagine. As you've just spoken about the pandemic and the closure that we've had for the last 12 months. Obviously, everything is starting to reopen this week. But how do you feel that Curators, I know we've gone into a bit of detail about the things that it adds, but what would you say is the main thing that Curators has done that's helping to reimagine museums?
I think that's a really interesting question, and it's one that there are multiple answers to, because I think every museum is so different in what it aims to do, the people it aims to reach, and the stories that it intends to tell, that the reimagination process means something very different for each museum, as it should. But I think what Curators can do is provide new solutions, new technological opportunities to allow museums to continue the amazing work they're doing, but to help share it more widely with more people. We're able to provide the access without any worries around conservation, and that, to my mind, can only be a good thing. So I think that's one of the parts of my work that I'm most excited about, and that I'd love to be able to look 3, 4, 5 years into the future once we've fully developed the platform and it's live and launched, and we've got all of these new partner museums on board. Because I think that working together, the reimagination process is going to be so fascinating, and something I can't wait to find out more about.
You did just mention there about the future of museums looking, sort of 4 or 5 years into the future. And I think it's safe to say that even if we do sort of get this pandemic under control within the near future, that it is going to take a while for the world to bounce back. We've got a lot of people out of work. There's obviously been a lot of people who have lost loved ones. People's views on non-essential travel and even essential travel, people are going to scrutinise more whether or not they actually need to go somewhere. So what do you see the landscape looking like for the future of museums?
Yeah, I think, you're absolutely right. It's been a really difficult year or so. And, the incredibly passionate, incredibly committed people in museums have been doing incredible work to try and keep telling their stories, safeguarding their objects. And I'm so happy that across the globe, museums are now being able to open back up again. But I feel that the future for museums is positive, absolutely. The human urge to know more, to discover, to ask questions, to be endlessly curious, that's not going away. We've quite rightly put in restrictions on and how we can travel, where we can travel, who we can spend time with. But once those restrictions are able to lift safely, once we can start to get back out into the world, visit places, then I'm sure that museums, both physically and digitally and virtually, will come back stronger than ever. And some really exciting stories are being told now in a museum environment for the first time. These aren't new stories. It's not the first time that we've engaged with them. But I'm really excited to hear more narratives from people of colour, from people who are queer or identify as queer, from different cultures, ethnicities, indigenous peoples, races. I want to hear more about the stories they have to tell so that I can improve my knowledge of those areas where I need to do better and find out more. And I think with Curators as a tool, we can really help those stories be told and bring them to more people. But yeah, it's really it's a time to assess what we've been doing and find out ways that we can do it better, we can do it more equitably, And I'm, really looking forward to seeing the fruits of that.
Yes, it is something that I think we all want to see. We've all got our fingers crossed that everything's going to bounce back, including the museum sector, and we do wish everyone involved the very best of luck in sort of finding their feet again and pushing forward. And I think it's safe to say that, we would like to sort of say to people, if you can, do support your local museums, because it is important. They've been closed for a long time. A lot of them rely on visitor revenue or donations, and this is our history. It needs preserving. Once it's gone, there's no getting it back. So you do think about your local museums and exhibits if you want a day out and fancy doing something you might not have done before.
Completely, absolutely. To all those people who've been working in museums for the last 12, 15 months, I see what you're doing. You've done incredibly well. All the work you've put into getting things reopened in the UK in the last week or so is absolutely astonishing. And you deserve International Museums Day. We all deserve International Museums Day, just to take stock of the incredible things that have been done and will continue to be done.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lauren, for taking the time to chat with us and celebrate International Museums Day with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem at all. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye now.